In this tutorial we're going to talk about relationships. Now that we have the character rigged, we need to put constraints on all the bones and set him up so that he works right. In Animation Master we do this in what's called relationships. What relationships are is exactly that. It's a relationship between two different properties. And you do that by creating a relationship within a model. Let's open up our model. So let's say import a model. Let's get our Will Rig 3. I've made a few modifications to him. If you look at his bones, let's go to our side view here. I changed the null to a bone that points backwards and straight up, and I call it the body bone, and then I put everything back or down from that. So what's going to happen here is, here's the control body. Actually, let me show that. These are just the geometry bones. Everything else is the exact same as it was before, but what I've done with the control, let me show everything by hitting the star button on the numpad. That will expand my whole hierarchy, and then I can shift select, hold down shift until it's done selecting, and then hit J and it will show everything. And I'm just going to hide the control main. Oops. Okay. So here you can see I replaced that body null with a bone that points out backwards, and then here's a control body, and so then the back and the pelvis are both children of this control body. So now if I look at my control setup, I have my control hand, control foot, and control body are child of my control main. So now we want to go in and start creating what I said a relationship was, and we do this by right-clicking on the model, saying New, Pose, and you can do one of two things. You can do an on-off, which will just be a switch that will turn these relationships on or off, or you can do a percentage where you can animate something within it. Let's show you both of them, and that way you can see the difference between them. If I go to a percentage, what it does is it brings me up in this that looks like an action, but what it is, it's actually the place where I set my properties. So let's open up a timeline, view my timeline. If you look here, it brings up a slider, and I can animate. This basically is a slider with 100 frames of animation on it, 0 to 100, each percentage being a frame that I can pose him in. So I can do this. I can take his leg, let's just take his thigh, and rotate it at, let me slide this up to 10 first. Okay, so now that I'm at 10%, I'm going to rotate his thigh up like this. And I've gone in the model and assigned some points to bones. If you look here, I've assigned somewhat of his torso and everything just to show this, but we'll go through doing that in a minute. Anyways, I can go to 10%, and then if I go to 20%, I can take that same thigh bone, hit rotate, and rotate it back. If I go to 30%, I can rotate this bone up like this. If I go to 40%, I can rotate this forward, and then if I go to 50%, rotate his foot down. And you can just do this for all the percentages, 1 through 100. So now what happens is when I take this slider, I can move this slider and it will animate. Bring his foot up, pull it back, and bring it forward. So I can set this however I want. I can set however many keyframes I want. I can set one at 0 and one at 100, and it will just blend between the two. Or I can set a lot of things in between. One thing we use poses for, or these percentage sliders, is like phonemes. You have your normal geometry like this, and your modified geometry up at 100%, and that gives you the ability to, like if he says goes from just a normal face to O, you can go everywhere in between that also. So that's a nice way of putting in sliders. They're also called blend shapes in other programs and things. I can go in here too and I can say, let's clear this. So right click in the window and hit clear. Actually, that doesn't work in a relationship here. Let's delete this one. Go over here to will rig 3 and go under user properties. This appears when you create a relationship, and you can click here, right click it and hit delete, and then say yes, I want to delete that. Okay, now it doesn't delete it down here, but you can just delete it. Right click here and say delete, yes. Okay, so let's do it one more time. So let's say user properties, right click on it, new property, and let's do another percentage. Okay, and now it shows up right here. So now I hit new relationship by right clicking on that. I right clicked on percent and said new relationship. You can also right click on it and say edit relationship. Okay, so now that I'm in here, another thing I can use this percentage for is I can go into what's called muscle mode. This is a very nice feature where let me do this. I'm going to shaded mode here. I could make his arm bulge by let's go into the top view here. I could say when his hand comes forward, or when his elbow bends, his bicep bulges. So if I say I can do this when I rotate this in, and let me go into the model real quick here so we can assign these points. Let's just do this. Okay, so go back to relationship. Now the hand is attached. So when his elbow comes in like that, I can go into muscle mode and go into wireframe and bulge this up just slightly. Move it up like this. And maybe bulge these just slightly too. Oops. Like that. Okay. So now, when I do my slider, so I can animate all that stuff in there. Now, I really wouldn't use a pose or a relationship to do this with the muscles. I just wanted to show you what you can do with it. I would use what's called smart skinning, and we'll go through that later on. But this is what a relationship is. It's basically telling me that when I drag this slider, this happens to this piece, or this bone moves this way, or this does this, or when I turn it on, this bone moves this way or has this property. And that's what a relationship is. So let's go back up here. Let's say project new, say no, objects import model, and reopen your O3. Now, like I said, I made a few modifications and I assigned some points, but we don't want to worry about the assigned points right now. We just want to worry about setting up the rig so that it works correctly. So let's take the timeline, just shrink it down about there. Open up the option triangle on the model, and then right click on the model and say new pose and call it on off. What the on off does is, instead of having a slider, it's just as if it goes from 0 to 100 and there's no animation. It just turns it on and then turns it off. So instead of animating the leg moving like I did in the previous one, it would just switch to the new position, and it just has either on or off. But for constraints, I like to use the on-off properties. So this one, let's open up the user properties here, and let's create or right click on user properties, say new property, folder, right click on it, say rename, and call it constraints. Okay, then drag this pose down on the constraints. Now open it up and rename this control constraints. Okay, and then you can right click on that and say edit relationship, but it's already got it open, so I don't need to open two windows of it. So let's go to our side view and let's start out with our leg. We need to see the control bones, so let's go back. Let's bring this back here. Let's open this up, go to bones, control main, click it and hit the star key on the numpad, and then shift select all the control bones and then hit J to show them. And just hide the control main again. Okay, so now I've got all these bones here. Let me switch the colors here so we can see the bones a little bit better. Let's go to customize appearance. Let's go background. Let's make it black. make the objects a gray, and I think we're good, so let's do that. Okay, now we can see the bones a little bit better. If I go into wireframe, you can see these. The first thing we want to do is work on the leg. We want the leg to work correctly. So let's start with the foot, remembering that this is our control foot and these are our control toes. Now what we want to do is we want the toes to rotate exactly like the control toes. So right click on, or click on the toes left, right click on it, say new constraint, orient like, and then with the eyedropper click control toes left. That's all you have to do. The next one is we want the foot to rotate up when I rotate this heel. So I want it to, I'm going to say foot left, right click, new constraint, orient like, go up here and click this tab right here, which is compensate or offset this bone. That means if I didn't use the compensate mode, this bone would have flipped around and oriented exactly like this one with the roll handle facing up. But with this offset, it will always stay in this position relative to this bone here. Okay, so now the foot works fine. Let's look at this. This is our leg hinge left. What we want it to do is we want it to always reach towards this joint or this control ankle. So I'm going to right click it, say new constraint, aim at control ankle left. So click it, and if it doesn't get it the first time, you can do it second. If I say new constraint, orient, or oops, didn't want that one. Delete it. If I right click on it, say new constraint, orient like, and I accidentally click out to nothing, you can go down in your properties menu and say target. You can choose the bone or just choose the eyedropper tool and go back and click it like this. Since it's got two, or the orient like, I don't want that. Delete it. Okay. So now this aim at, what it's going to do is it's going to always aim at the control ankle left, this one, which is a child of this bone. So when I lift the heel off the ground, when I lift the heel up like this, this ankle is going to move up to here and up to right here, and this bone is going to try to reach it. So with that, I just say leave it that way, but scale to reach, turn it on, because I want this bone to scale up and down on the z-axis only, so I turn it on. Okay, so that's that one. Now my calf muscle, or my calf left here, I right click on it and I say new constraint, kinematic, or I want to make an IK chain from this bone, and I hit compensate, and then I go to control heel left. Okay, so that means it's going to stay in this position, but my control heel left is going to control the IK in this leg. The last thing I want to do is grab my thigh left, right click on it, new constraint, orient like, this bone right here. That means this thigh is always going to try to orient like your control thigh hint left. The reason why we had that is so that it will always keep the knee pointing straight and the roll handle pointing straight out, and won't let the thigh rotate backwards. And because it is a child of the control knee, when I rotate the control knee, it will automatically rotate this, and the thigh will try to orient like it. So that's the leg setup for the control legs. Now what I can do is I'll close this down and just go down to actions, double click it, and we can try it out. So let's go into our side view. Let's grab the control foot here. Oh, before I do anything else, I have to turn it on. So I go under my properties here, under control constraints, you turn it on. There we go. So now in my action, when I click the control foot, you'll see all these other bones turn yellow. So they all turned yellow, and that means they are being affected by this bone. And that's because when I grab this bone, I can translate it, and sure enough, the leg, you can see how all the bones are working together. The leg is, this calf muscle has an IK constraint to this heel, so when I grab this heel and rotate it up, you'll see how it all works. This bone right here is being oriented like this one with the offset, so it stays in the same orientation to that bone when I move it. If I go here and I select this bone and I rotate it on its y-axis, you can see how the thigh will always orient like this bone, like this. And then if I go to my side view here and see my toes, I grab my control toes and I rotate that, my toes will move exactly like the control toes do. Now, one thing we need to go in and do is we need to lock the IK for a lot of these bones, meaning I don't want, when I grab the end of the toes, to drag it, to pull it, and to have the foot rotate. I just want the toes to rotate on their own. So I'll lock this IK. So let's do that real quick and I'll show you what it does. Let's go to our model, go to the side view, click on the control toes left, and in its properties say lock IK on. Now when I go here, if I grab the end of this bone, I can only rotate it. It doesn't matter what I do with the mouse, it just rotates. It just does that. But then I can still do this here, move the heel back like this. And the leg works correctly. Now the only bones that you're going to be able to see, let's hit clear. The only bones that you're going to be able to see in animation, let me hide all the ones you won't see. Let's do this. Now these orient-like bones you won't see, of course. So in the leg, the only ones you're really going to see are these. You're going to see a foot like this, you're going to see a heel, you're going to see a toe, and you're going to see a knee, and that's it. So that's all we need. That's the whole leg setup. So let's close this down and delete that action so we don't have to worry about it. So that's our control leg, or our control constraints for the leg. Now if you look under here, you'll have a relationships folder and it will say control constraints relationships. Relationship 1, and then it will have the bones. If you double click on that relationship, it will automatically go into edit mode for that. Okay, so the rest of these, let's go into our side view here. We want the pelvis here. Oops, the pelvis, that's the control pelvis. We want this pelvis here, or this pelvis, right click on it, new constraint, orient like the control pelvis. Oh, we see that the control pelvis is rotated wrong. This is another way that you can check your bones. If I go to my control pelvis and look at it, the roll handle's pointing out sideways, so I'm going to go back to there and I'm going to grab the roll handle and just rotate it backwards, and then go to my side view and just pull it till it goes all the way back. So its rotation now, let's click on it again. Let's do 90. Move it right about there. Make sure that the pelvis, what's the pelvis rotation? 94.77. So let's make sure that this is 94.77. Okay. And then it's negative 180 degrees. That means it's straight, pointing straight back there. So now if I go in my relationship, you can see how it works just perfectly. So now what we want to do is, now that we have that one done, we've got the pelvis orienting like it, but we also want it to translate to the control pelvis. Oh, see, it didn't get it there, so I have to hit target, get the eyedropper tool again, and go over and grab it. So it translates to the control pelvis also. Now let's do the same here. So here's the body, right click, new constraint, orient like, control body, right click, new constraint. One thing you need to do is unselect it and then reselect it, new constraint, translate to control body. And in these constraints you can set them as percentages, so I could have it translate to at 50% or orient like at 50%, but these I want to go exactly with it. Now here's where we need to do the spine. All these spine bones need to orient like the other ones. So let's go through here. Let's select this spine here. Okay. Right click on it, new constraint, orient like, go up and hit compensate, and hit this first one, control back 1. Now I only want that to go by 50%. The second one, right click, new constraint, orient like, compensate, control back 1, 100%. Now this one, oops, this one here, new constraint, orient like, compensate, control back 2 at 50%. This one here, new constraint, orient like, compensate, control back 2, 100%. This one here, new constraint, orient like, compensate, control back 3, 50%. Actually, this one, there's 3 bones that I want to follow this one, so I'm going to go 33%. And this bone right here, this is the spine 6, so right click, new constraint, orient like, compensate, control bone or control back 3, this will be 66%. And this one right here, new constraint, orient like with compensate, control back 3 at 100%. Now here's where you can see the reason why I offset the control neck from the neck just slightly, because if they were on top of each other I couldn't pick them to do orient like. So I want to select the neck, say new constraint, orient like, control neck. Now I select my head, I say new constraint, orient like, control head. Okay, so that's the whole spine. So let's go into our top view here. Let's do the arm. Let's first start with the fingers. Now, with this, what I've done is I've just slightly offset the control fingers so that I can pick them correctly. So here I'm going to go, let's go into shaded mode, pick this one, pinky 1 left, I want to new constraint, orient like, control pinky 1 left. Control, or pinky 2 left, I want to orient like, control pinky 2 left at 50%. And then this third one, orient like this at 100%. I'm just going to go down here and do that for all the fingers. So that's orient like this, orient like this, 50%, and this one, orient like this. Okay, so that one's good. This one, orient like this, 100%. 100% is default, so you don't have to do anything unless you want it changed. Orient like this at 50. Orient like this at 100. Orient like this. Constraints in Animation Master are very simple. That's one thing that I like a lot about it. They're very simple, very straightforward. Okay. This at 50%. Okay, so those are all the fingers. Okay, so let's go into our top view. Let's go back to our model real quick here and right click on it, say save as will rig 04, just so we don't lose any of our work if it crashes. Go back to our relationship in the top view here and let's go through the hand. First thing we want to do is we want to work on the arm here. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to work a lot like the foot. Click on the hand bone, or hand left, say right click, new constraint, orient like, control hand left. That's all we need for that one. Now this one, forearm left, you right click, say new constraint, IK or kinematic constraint 2, control hand left. The bicep, you select it, bicep left, new constraint, orient like, control bicep hint left. Now one thing that we're seeing here is if you see this problem, then what we need to do is fix the hierarchy. The bicep, it's actually a child of the bicep, but it may not be attached to it. If it's attached to it, it's going to be pulling the bicep down with the IK constraint. So let's go to the top view in our model, select our forearm, and it's right there. Let's see, does it say attached to parent? It doesn't say it, so it's probably not. So let's grab it, drag it back on top of its parent, and then highlight it, go down in your properties and say attached to parent on. Now when I go back to my relationship, it's all fixed. So you can go to your front view here and you can see how it all worked right. Okay, let's go back to our top view here. Now with this arm hinge, I need to select it, say new constraint, aim at, control hand left. And then I go back and I do the same thing. I say scale to reach, z-axis only. And that's it for the arm. Now let's go to our front view and click on our clavicle left, right click on it, new constraint, orient like, control clavicle left. And we are done with our control constraints. So let me shut that down. Now if I open up an action, you'll see if I grab the foot, his leg moves all correctly. If I grab the body, or the control body, and move it, he moves up and down. Now remember, just look at the rig, I haven't attached all the points yet. But you can see how he moves while his feet stay and his hands stay put. See how his arm right here, you can see how it's pointing up to the control hand and his foot is staying put. So I can just grab this and move it all around. Now this for some reason isn't reaching to it. Let's go back here. Let's check our control arm hint. Doesn't look like we got that. Doesn't look like it works. So let's shut down that action. Delete it. Sometimes when you have an action open, it will interfere. So let's go back here, just double click on that relationship, go into our top view, select the control arm hinge left. Yeah, it looks like it missed it. So let's grab it, say new constraint, aim at, control hand left, and turn on scale to reach and on z-axis only. Now let's shut it down. Go double click actions to open up a new one. Grab the control hand and start moving it. Yep, it looks like it's working just fine, and you can see how the elbow moves right along with the arm, and that the bicep always stays back. And I can grab this and rotate it, and you see how when I rotate it on its y-axis, the elbow moves. Okay, so let's clear that. Delete that action. So it looks like we're done for our control, but let's try one more thing. Let's go into our side view here. Grab our control pelvis and move it. You can see how that works just fine. Okay, and then our spine bones, we want to grab this one, move it just slightly. Okay, now here's a problem that we're seeing. These bones are not locked down, so let's lock them. Let's go here. Go to our side view, go to our control head, and lock the IK on that. Let's go to our control neck, lock the IK on that, control back, lock IK, control back, lock IK, control back, and that's the start of an IK chain, so I don't need to lock it. Let's go into our action now. Now if I grab this top one and I move it, everything moves with it. You see how it's not a chain, or it's not a kinematic chain anymore. But you see how I'm getting a good deformation here. If I bend him back, he's bending really nice. And if I bend him forward, he's bending really nice. And I can bend this one forward, and it'll collapse a little bit, and then this one too. We'll see it better when we attach all the points to him. But you can see here how it's moving quite well. I'm actually getting good deformation there. Yeah, looks good. So let's clear that. So let's go up here to the side view again. Check the head. So if I rotate the head back, that works. If I grab the base of it and rotate the neck, that all works. So I think we're in business. Let's hit clear. Delete that action and save our model. Okay, so now under here, under constraints, he has control constraints, and you can see if I open up an action and I grab the foot, the control foot, and I move it up like this, if I go to my control constraints, I can turn them off, and then it stops. Those relationships or those constraints no longer work anymore. They don't tell the mesh to do anything or tell the skeleton to do anything. So I can turn them on and it'll work, off and it doesn't. And that's nice when you're doing other things. So I just leave it all on all the time. So once again, let's just save it. And those are the control constraints. So we'll go on to the cosmetic constraints next.